I'm your host, Kayla, and we have a very exciting guest with us today. Ian Doescher, correct? Is that how the last name is pronounced?
It's Doescher, but that's okay. I get Doescher all the time. Yeah.
Ian Doescher, thank you so much for correcting me. He is the author of the incredibly funny and very entertaining William Shakespeare's Star Wars. And I listened to the box set of the first three. I listened to about the first 10 minutes of the first one, and I paused it, and I told my husband, you have to listen to this with me. This is one of the funniest, most entertaining things I've ever listened to. As someone who went to school for theater for a while, it was a nice break.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us and calling in. And in case anybody listening is curious, there's a 4-hour time difference between where we are right now. So thanks so much for calling it or letting us call you this late.
No problem.
So William Shakespeare Star Wars. And you recently also wrote a chapter in From a Certain Point of View about Palpatine. And and between that and the contributions you've made, all of those are done in iambic pentameter. And for any of our listeners who nap through freshman English, that's when an unstressed syllable is followed by a stressed syllable 5 times in a line, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Da-dum, 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 da-dum.
Exactly. Yep. How intimidating is it to have such a great idea as a mashup of Star Wars and Shakespeare, but your writing has to stay between these lines?
It was definitely intimidating early on, and it took a lot of practice to sort of get used to the rhythm of iambic pentameter but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's kind of like exercising a muscle. So these days, writing in iambic pentameter is much easier than when I started all those years ago. I'm
actually reading through From a Certain Point of View right now, and it's just a delightful collection of things and stories. And I actually went through and did a line-by-line analysis of Palpatine, and it took me over an hour. maybe because it's complex, maybe because I wanted to do it really well. But it was really exciting. And how did your process of From a Certain Point of View come about? Like, did they offer you a chapter? Did they give you a timeline? Were you given a specific character you had to stick through? What was your process like for that?
I think I was probably asked fairly late among the authors they asked, because I had a pretty short timeline, honestly. They sent me a list of, two lists, actually. One list of sort of the possible scenes they thought could work, and another list of all of the ones that already had been written. And they were sort of, gently suggesting that they would love for me to do Palpatine learning of the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but they did give me the choice. And the other one on the list that I really liked the sound of was Chewbacca, as he overhears the conversation between Obi-Wan and Luke and Han in the cantina. But they already had several cantina stories, so I went ahead with Palpatine.
That's great. It was, like I said, it was really fun to read, and I don't have much Shakespeare acting chops. My husband has much more than I do, so when I showed it to him, he also really enjoyed it. So this question came from a listener, and she said another person who's a big fan of iambic pentameter is Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of the Tony Award-winning shows like In the Heights and Hamilton. If you two were to engage in a poetry battle, who would win, and would you have a secret weapon?
Oh, boy. I would not even, I would not enter a poetry battle against Miranda. I'm not that dumb. He is, Hamilton blows me away. And when I first listened to it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is really sort of life-changing for me. And I did, in fact, think to myself, like, here is somebody who appreciates so many of the same things that I do in terms of rhyme and meter and just how words work and that kind of thing. And it's so obvious in his libretto for Hamilton. And so, I'm a huge fan, and I do not intend to square off against him in a poetry battle anytime soon. My only secret weapon maybe would be iambic pentameter, but he would crush me in everything. So, yeah. He's
That's
great.
fair. That's fair. I would also not enter in any kind of competition, even if it's something I know I'd win with Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'd just be like, nope, you win. And you do have a background in music. I was reading your resume, or more or less, on your website. You have a master's degree from an Ivy League school, which is nothing to shake a stick at. That's amazing. A PhD and the BA in music. So with your interest in writing and music, is there any chance, assuming you had blessings of all the parties necessary, would you consider turning William Shakespeare's Star Wars into a musical?
Sure, absolutely. I think that would be really fun. Yeah. Again, I'm not, as I'm not a fantastic writer of music. I do it occasionally, but I'm not sure I would be my first choice. But it would be a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of musicals, so it would be great joy to see how that would come out.
Other than Hamilton, what's like your number one musical? Be completely honest.
Being completely honest, The Music Man is like literally the last time I watched the movie of The Music Man. Like I basically couldn't stop crying. It was making me so happy, which is kind of ridiculous. I fully admit. I grew up with the Pirates of Penzance, so that's another one
such a good show, or good musical and movie, like so good.
Yeah.
No, I used to, when I lived in Los Angeles, I've seen the first part of Wicked 3 times, and I've seen the last part of Wicked probably upwards of 7 or 8 times, because we'd sneak in often. We only got caught once ever, and that's a show that no matter how many times I watch it, I will cry at one point.
I have never seen Wicked, but
no.
Yeah, I know. I need to see it.
If you get the opportunity, don't miss it. It's a great show. So when you were writing, was there ever a character that kind of surprised you with how creative you could get with them and how far you could take their character? And did they end up being your favorite?
There were characters that surprised me for sure. I tend to, as an adult, sort of think of Luke Skywalker as, especially in A New Hope, as sort of just being kind of a snivelly kid, right? But he is, as I was writing and working on that book, I was sort of realizing how much he is the hero of that movie. In a way, I tend to think of, I certainly loved Han Solo and thought of him more as a more heroic kind of figure, but Luke is absolutely the central figure of that movie, and I never really quite realized that until I sat down to write that book. In terms of other characters and things I did with them, I mean, I don't know. I think that I was really glad that I figured out what to do with Yoda, because I had a bunch of different ideas and none of them were feeling quite right. And the instant that I thought about putting his lines in haiku, I just knew that was exactly what it should be. So that was another one that just seemed to work really well.
That's great. So on your website, you have frequently asked questions, and I'm going to go ahead and re-ask you one of them. I'm sorry. All licensing and rights aside, every blessing given, what show, book, movie would you most want to Shakespeareify if you could?
Oh, probably The Princess Bride. If I had my choice, I think that would make a really fun adaptation. We've also talked about doing Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future would be a lot of fun. It would have been even cooler had we gotten it out in time for a 30th anniversary sort of publication. I once years ago, back when I first started this, or shortly after the first book came out, I had my agent contact J.K. Rowling's people to ask them about doing, William Shakespeare's history of Hogwarts, which would be not one of her existing stories, but would be a play about the founding of Hogwarts with Slytherin and Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw and Gryffindor as the main characters. And, they very kindly said thank you, but no thank you. But that would have been a lot of fun.
That would have been a lot of fun, especially with how much new stuff they're coming out with. I mean, the Harry Potter, the whole lore seemed to be something that just kind of calmed down for a couple of years, then popped back up with the success of Fantastic Beasts, which was, in my opinion, the best of all the Harry Potter related movies. But maybe it's just because I'm biased toward America. I don't know.
I enjoyed it, and I the stage play that's going on in London now, and this Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Cursed Child. Yeah, I've got a copy of it like right by me. I'm right next to my bookcase.
Yeah.
Every Shakespeare fan or anybody who enjoys Shakespeare's works can pinpoint like that one moment that you were like, oh my gosh, I enjoy this. I love this. And mine is watching Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing with my mom. And I'm going to say the early 2000s because it was like one of the first DVDs we ever owned.
Yeah.
Do you have a moment like that?
Well, I mean, the Branagh Much Ado About Nothing is right up there for me. It came out in the theater in the summer of '93 for me, and that I was about to be a junior in high school, and me and my mom saw it in the theater together probably a dozen times, literally. Like, in fact, I don't know that I've ever seen a movie in the theater as many times as I went to see that movie. Even before that, I think it was my freshman year English class when we read Othello, and I just was captivated by Iago as a villain, and just how terrible he is. I've always thought it'd be really fun to play him, and I don't know what that says about my personality, but it's I do think that was sort of the first moment where I was like, wow, this is awesome.
I love how everyone can relate. They all have one moment of Shakespeare. They're like, yes, that was it for me too. I think that's a fun way to get to learn people, get to know more about people. Since performance rights for William Shakespeare Star Wars are super, super rare, as you so delicately put it on your website, have you got to see any of it performed live? And how was that for you?
No, I mean, performance rights are not even rare. They're just basically non-existent. So I have not seen it. I haven't seen it performed live. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have seen people like sort of do dramatic readings here and there, and that's fun. I mean, I think even more so, or somewhat similar, right, is the audiobooks, and hearing the audiobooks, which are just done so well, and I can say that because I had very little to do with them, and the cast who recorded them just were so great, and they incorporate the John Williams score and all the sound effects, and so they really are just masterfully done. And so hearing those, it didn't even feel like I was hearing something that I had done. It was just like I was hearing something that was just really enjoyable.
Yeah, it just feels like a radio show. It feels very natural and well done when you're listening to it. And I'm a huge theater nerd, and I tried to go to school for it at one point. Like, the idea of combining Shakespeare and Star Wars, the second I heard it, I went, yes, that's a great idea. I want to hear all of it. When you came up with it, what was the initial reaction of people around you, friends, family, etc.?
I mean, I didn't tell anybody, just about anybody, until I was already sort of knee deep into it with Quirk Books. And at that point I started telling a few people, and people had mixed reactions. Some people who have known me forever were like, oh, of course you're doing that, because they know how much I like Shakespeare and Star Wars. Other people heard the idea. I mean, I remember one friend who I told about it, and he kind of gave a guarded reaction, and he confessed to me later on that he had been really skeptical. He thought it was a terrible idea. Reactions were sort of all over the place. Some people who don't have much appreciation for either Shakespeare or Star Wars just kind of, shake their heads or roll their eyes or whatever. And, so it is kind of fun to watch people react to it.
It's one of
those, to this day, actually.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like purists may not like, but I'm pretty sure William Shakespeare himself would find this hilarious and enjoy the heck out of it.
Yeah, and I have not faced many of those. I certainly have not faced many of those purists on the Star Wars side. On the Shakespeare side, a little bit. There are definitely people when the first book came out who were like, well, this is clearly not Shakespeare. And I was like, no, you're absolutely right. It's a guy who wrote a book called William Shakespeare Star Wars. So I would not claim to be Shakespeare, but I do hope that Shakespeare himself would like it. Yeah.
I'm sure he would.
Right, exactly.
What was it? back to Lin-Manuel Miranda was in traffic and someone was yelled at him from their car and were like, "You're the guy who wrote Hamlet." And he's like, "I wish I wrote Hamlet." And she yelled back, "Yay, Hamlet," and drove off. So Shakespeare everywhere. Who knew?
Yeah.
So since you haven't, since performance rights are non-existent, have you gotten to see any of your writings performed? Since this is in the style of a play, have you written any other plays, anything similar?
I wrote an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, a Shakespearean adaptation of A Christmas Carol, which is really not that huge of a stretch. But what I tried to do to because the language itself is not that big of a stretch. Dickens to Shakespeare is not a gigantic leap. But what I tried to do to sort of make it a fun mashup was have all of the basically all of the side characters except Scrooge himself are also Shakespearean characters. So Bob Cratchit and his wife are Benedict and Beatrice, and the ghost of Christmas Present, of course, is Falstaff, and things like that. And so that was really fun to do. And I haven't seen it perform, but basically one of the reasons I did it, it was sort of one of these ideas that came to me literally like in the middle of the night in late 2015, and I decided to try to, write it quickly and basically just self-publish it for that holiday season. But part of the thinking there was like, I've always been sad that William Shakespeare's Star Wars is not able to be performed, and so here's something that could be performed. And so there are a couple of groups that have done that, and I haven't had a chance to see it myself yet, but it's fun that it is happening here and there.
There's, I think it was New York Times, some large publication a few years ago did a collection of Scrooges, one from every state, and just looking
fun.
at different adaptations. And one of them, there was a Klingon one, which I would pay so much money to go see. Then there was like a drag version. There was a gender swap version. It was just so interesting to see the creativity around a story we've all heard so many times. Yeah. And I'd be really interested to see your adaptation.
Yeah, I got an email just not too long ago from a nonprofit theater that was, saying like, we're looking for a weird Christmas Carol adaptation. And it's just funny that clearly like theaters are looking for something that is not just the traditional Christmas Carol. They're all looking for some sort of different spin on it.
We're looking to mix it up. Like I said, it's a story we've all heard so many times, and at a certain point you want something new and fresh. So I think it's fun. The 50 different Scrooges was hilarious. A friend of mine was the one for our state, so they've got it framed, and every time I see it, I'm like, I know you're there, but I'm just looking at the Klingon guy. So sorry.
That's funny.
He's stealing all the attention. Beyond writing, do you have any other talents? Obviously music, but beyond those, do you have any other talents that, I don't know, in 10 years we're going to find out that you're really good at blank?
Not that I know of. The other thing I do that is, my artistic outlet is singing and music and that sort of thing. So I don't think there's anything else that we're going to find out that I'm suddenly really good at. It's certainly not going to be, competitive sports. So
I feel you on that one. Sports is not my thing. Does your family participate in sports? Because I come from a family who does none of that kind of stuff. And then when I got into the real world and everyone else had a football team, I was like, what? Yeah,
that's funny.
So from other interviews I saw that you were in, you were talking about how this came about, William Shakespeare Star Wars, a Shakespeare Festival mixed up with watching Star Wars. What were the odds that kind of thing was going to happen to you? And just what was your eureka moment of this could be a thing and I can make it awesome?
When I I don't actually think, when I first had the idea, I thought, I think I could possibly do this, but I still didn't know how it was actually going to work. And so it wasn't really until I sat down and started writing, just seeing if the dialogue could even work in iambic pentameter and that kind of thing. Once I sat down and started doing it, it felt like it was working, and even then, I guess it's hard to say when there was an actual eureka moment, because probably I didn't have an actual eureka moment until I actually, got a call from the editor at work, and he was saying, I really love this and I really want to do it. I mean, that was when it was suddenly like, okay, like this is actually, it's not only that I think that it's turning out okay, it's that somebody else is too.
At any point, did you feel like this isn't worth it, and somehow you just like overcame that, or was it just fire under your bum from the get-go on getting it done, and like once you got the ball rolling, you weren't starting till it was finished?
Well, what's interesting, that's a timely question you ask, because I realized just a couple weeks ago, what happened was I sent the idea to the editor at Quirk, and he wrote me back and said, that's an interesting idea, and if you write something, let me know and I will read it. And I realized a couple weeks ago, probably if he had not said that to me, if he had not said that he would actually read it, I would probably not have taken the time to write it. I would have said, oh, well, it's a great idea, but nothing's ever going to happen with it. And I'm so busy, so I'll find other things to do. But the fact that he was actually going to, had told me he was going to read it, gave me that motivation, right? And did make it something where I was like, okay, I got to at least try this. This is sort of my one shot to try to do something that I think is a really fun idea. And there's somebody who's at least willing to take a look at it. So let's go for it.
So what's next? So you've got Shakespeare, Star Wars, you've got the short story in From a Certain Point of View. What was the other one that you had? Deadpool Does Shakespeare. What's next? What are you working on that you can talk about?
Well, I can definitely talk about The Last Jedi, which is, will be coming at some point. The other thing that, I'm working on a collection of basically quirky poetry right now. So we'll see if anything happens with that. That's probably the main other project. I have lots of other things that I am working on bit by bit, but that's probably the biggest one.
Lots of irons in the fire.
Yeah.
Do you have your ticket for Last Jedi?
Not yet, but I will soon.
Oh no.
I know.
We have very limited cinema space up here, so we all have to buy our tickets really quickly.
Yeah.
And with the websites crashing, I think it was during Rogue One, all my friends just went to the box office at the cinema and bought their tickets that way, and I haven't done that since 2000. So it was exciting to get together as a group and be like, let's go to the theater.
Yeah. I will definitely have tickets soon.
Good. So which of the books so far have you enjoyed the most, and is it the same as your favorite Star Wars film?
Yeah, it's so hard to say which book I've enjoyed the most. The Attack of the Clones, my version of that was one where I gave myself some particularly difficult writing challenges that I just sort of set up for myself, and was able to overcome them. And so that one sort of has a soft spot in my heart just for that reason, although that's definitely not my favorite of the movies. I really, I don't know. I guess I enjoy my versions of Empire and Jedi, but that's also partially because those are some of my favorite movies.
Right.
They're actually things I look at now, not to be like too George Lucas or whatever, but there are things I look at now in the first book, and I'm like, gosh, I kind of wish I could change some of that.
Oh no.
Not that I will. There will be no special edition, but anyway. Yeah, so it really is hard though to say which one I've enjoyed the most. They've all been really fun.
It's like asking which of your dogs you love the most. I love all my animals. They're all very good. So we've talked about what's coming next. We've talked about William Shakespeare, Star Wars. Is there anything else you want to bring up or go over before we sign off for the evening? Because it is almost 11:30 where you're at.
Not that I can think of. Yeah, you've covered a lot of good bases.
I was trying to be a little more creative with the questions, but I was trying to avoid your frequently asked, so I apologize.
No, not at all.
But anyhow, so thank you so much for joining us. And where can our listeners find you?
Thank you for having me, and they can find me at my website, iandescher.com, or on Twitter at iandescher also.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.